Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending TalentQuest webinar on employee engagement today. We're really excited to have you here. My name is Dina Quassett-Campbell, and I am a member of the communications team here at TalentQuest. And we're really excited to spend the next hour with you making the most of your employee engagement surveys and your employee engagement plans for the upcoming year. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. After the presentation, we will have some time for a brief question and answer session. If you do have questions, please send them via the box that appears on the top right of your screen. Also, after the webinar, we will forward a copy of the presentation as well as a recording to everybody. So let's get started. Our presenter today is Janiece Young. Janiece is an associate consultant here at TalentQuest, specializing in organizational development and performance management consulting. She is a certified professional in human resources and also holds a Master's of Science degree in industrial organizational psychology. Since joining TalentQuest in 2013, Janiece has particularly enjoyed supporting clients and project teams through a variety of analytically driven projects to include organizational surveys, selection benchmarking, and job analysis. That's a mouthful. We're so glad to have you here today, Janiece. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina, for that warm introduction, and thank you all for joining our webinar today. So we have a lot of information that we would like to cover in a very short amount of time, but we hope to get through it all and then still leave a few minutes before 2 for questions. So like Dina mentioned, today we really want to talk about how to maximize your employee engagement survey data. There's a ton of research available to you in regards to how to set up an employee engagement survey, even the types of questions you should ask, who you should include, when you should send it out. But there tends to be not a ton of information available in regard to what to do with your data once you've collected it. So you've got all this awesome feedback from your employees, but now what? So that's the piece that we really want to focus on today and leave you with some tips so that you'll know what to do with your data, how to maximize that information, and how to use that information to your advantage to really implement some positive change. I do want to give you a bit of a heads up that throughout this presentation, you will see some very familiar faces of individuals who you both know and probably love. These are those individuals who you rely on for advice, parenting tips, even life hacks, so to speak. And you probably tend to trust these individuals more than a typical Google search or Wikipedia search or even information that you find on WebD. So for these folks, I like to say that whatever they say is pretty much as good as gold. So considering that most of you probably had no clue who I was before the introduction that was made a few minutes ago, I wanted to enlist the help of these individuals, considering that they've already earned your loyalty and your trust. So be mindful that you'll see a few familiar faces pop up throughout today's presentation. So let's just begin with a simple definition of engagement. Before we get into those tips on how to maximize your data, I want to give some overview information about employee engagement just to make sure that we're all on the same page in regards to the topic at hand. So when we talk about employee engagement, we are really saying that engagement is the emotional commitment that an employee has to the organization and its goals, resulting in discretionary effort. And when we say discretionary effort, this equates to the level of effort that people could give if they wanted to, that goes above and beyond what's required. So these are going to be your employees that not only do what they have to do, but they go above that standard and they exceed your expectations and they're overachievers. And these are really your superstars. So when we say engagement, we're really talking about that discretionary effort and how many of your employees or what percentage of your employee population is really motivated to reach that level of performance and productivity. So it's that above and beyond threshold that we are mentioning when we say engagement. So just keep that in mind, that it's not just your average performer, it's really your superstars in a sense of who's engaged and who may not be engaged. also thought it might be neat to start off this presentation with some statistics about engagement and why engagement really matters. All the stats that you see here presented in this presentation come from Gallup's annual State of the American Workplace report that is publicly published online for free every year. So if engagement is something that you're really interested in, or it's an initiative of yours that sitting on your desk at the moment and you're looking for more data to help back your initiatives, feel free to research that report because it's made free to the public. But I've highlighted some interesting things that Gallup was able to find in their research in regard to employee engagement. The first of those being that 70% of American workers are not engaged or actively disengaged. And when we say 70%, that is a huge percentage of your employee population. And your not engaged folks are folks that are just contributing. So they're just doing what they can to make it. They're your average performers. They're doing what's asked of them and nothing more. And then you have your actively disengaged category of employees, which is a little bit more dangerous. So these are your employees who may be toxic to the organization. They may spread negativity. They may just bring the entire spirit of the workplace down and bring morale down. And they can in turn bring other employees down with them. So they can, take a not engaged or even an engaged employee down to the actively disengaged level with them over time. So it's a very dangerous category for your employees to be in. And the fact that 70% of American workers fall in either of those categories is really something that we'd like to get that number down. And I'll give you some tips on how you might be able to do that in your organization. But that definitely sheds some light into why engagement matters and why it can be such an issue. Also, I wanted to pull in this statement from their report about performance management. And a lot of times when we think about employee engagement, we may not tend to think about how that ties into performance management, or you may not even naturally see the link between the two concepts, but they actually tie in very closely together. And it says here that managers who focus on their employee strengths can practically eliminate active disengagement. So just by focusing on the right things in your feedback conversations, in your coaching conversations, in those performance review discussions, you can practically eliminate active disengagement. So really motivating your employees, focusing more on what they do right versus what they do wrong, and really helping them to leverage their unique strengths is really going to go a long way in terms of employee engagement and how to keep those employees motivated to produce at their highest level. There's also a fun fact here that really taps into flexibility in the workplace. And this is a trend that's becoming more and more popular or more visible as people are seeking to find new jobs and the economy has picked up and jobs are becoming more competitive. You see that a perk almost or a benefit of certain jobs, they will highlight that they have a flexible work schedule, or that you're able to work remotely or from a different location a certain amount of times a week. And that's really desirable for a lot of our job seekers today, especially as we see that a lot of millennials are joining the workforce and will continue to sort of overpower the workforce in the coming years. So having this perk is something that is really beneficial. And there's data and research that backs it up that says that those who spend less than 20% of their time working remotely are more engaged than their on-site counterparts. So I liked this specific statistic because it really spoke to having an ideal balance. So not removing the employee completely from the office culture and being face-to-face with their colleagues and their teammates, but providing them with some sort of balance to work from home or work remotely for a percentage of time. Now, I do want to point out that those employees who are not offered any sort of flexible work schedule or are not offered any percentage of time to work remotely or work from another location, that group of individuals had the lowest engagement overall. So we know that something in this case is better than nothing. Offering at least one day is better than offering 0 days of telecommuting. We do know, though, that however, any too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So we may not want to overdo it in certain cases, depending on your organization and the industry you're in and how realistic that may be. But this really speaks to having an ideal balance and really boosting engagement levels just by implementing something so small such as this. And then lastly, I wanted to pull in something that really spoke to the bottom line. So active disengagement costs the U.S. $450 billion to $550 billion per year, and that's huge. I know the numbers speak the loudest for most executive leadership teams, so this is something that you can really highlight when speaking about engagement and why engagement matters. 450 billion to 550 billion is a huge number, and this number comes from the amount of money that's spent just to onboard someone, the amount of money it takes to train someone, their salary and benefits package, and the value of that position, and then what happens when you lose that employee, how much money you lose, and then you have to rehire for that position and retrain someone, and it's just more and more dollars that are going into that bucket because this individual was actively disengaged. And this accounts for the individuals who they might have brought along with them. So those toxic employees can really spread that hostility and negative tension throughout the organization and can really cost the organization a ton of money. So keep that in mind. Keep all of these statistics in mind as we go through today's presentation about why engagement is such a huge deal and why it matters today in your workplace. I wanted to also provide you with a visual as we spoke to the bottom line in that last statistic about really how the employee engagement relates to your organization's growth and profit. So what you see here is what we like to call the engagement profit chain. So you can see that as an employee's discretionary effort or their engagement levels increase, these employees tend to care more. They tend to be more productive. They give better service to their customers, and they even stay in their jobs longer. So all of those facts leads to having happier customers. So your customer satisfaction goes up. These customers tend to buy more and refer more often. So that results in increased levels of customer loyalty. And then all of that together drives sales and profits even higher. So just simply having an engaged employee can really impact your organization's bottom line just by the level of service they provide, how satisfied your customers are with that level of service, and then their willingness to stay as customers, your employees' willingness to stay with the organization as an employee, and then increased production as well from your employee. All of that points to increased profits and growth. And companies with more engaged employees obviously tend to have higher profitability rates according to this graph, but also when employees are engaged, they become more productive and efficient, which is really a huge deal in maximizing your employees' productivity and what they can offer for your organization. There's an interesting study that was done by Wyatt and Watson that found that companies that have highly engaged employees produce 26% higher revenue per employee. And that's huge. That equation makes perfect sense in the realm of engagement and what we've been speaking on today. And the more engaged your employees are, the more efficient and productive they become, which in turn lowers the operating costs and increase the profit margin. So if you're looking for a way to really focus your conversation and drive your point home with your leadership team, this is a great way to show them how all of these pieces are connected and how they all affect the bottom line of the organization. I'm sure that this is something that will be well received, especially in grasping the full total concept of employee engagement and what it means for your organization. There are also a few engagement drivers that research has shown to be predictive of employee engagement. These drivers are going to be the focus of your employee engagement survey. So you want to make sure when you deploy an engagement survey that you're tapping into each of these areas to ensure that you're asking the right questions and focusing on the right things. So I'll pull up a few of those here on your screen, but I wanted to point out that because a truly rich and strong employee engagement survey needs to, for lack of a better word, engage on a very deep level, we'll want to uncover what employees really care about, what they think is critical to their own futures, even what aspects of their jobs may keep them up at night or even distract them from the quality of their work. So if we know that those are the types of things that we'd like to measure, we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions to uncover that type of information or to measure those kinds of emotions. By doing so, you'll really learn what motivates your people, and from there, you can tap into that motivation to help bring out their best at work. We want to focus on these aspects of job satisfaction and engagement that you see here on your screen because these engagement drivers are commonly linked to organizational performance. So as we talk through today's presentation, just make sure that you make a note of those and use it as a way to cross-check the questions that you may have developed for your engagement survey, just to ensure that all of these areas have been accounted for and that you're tapping into each of these in your survey. So let's switch gears a little. That was just some background information on employee engagement and why it matters. But I really want to spend the remainder of today's webinar on the 8 things that you need to know in order to maximize your employee data and how to take that feedback to the next level and really how to implement some positive change and to do that relatively quickly. So I have 8 tips for you today and we'll talk through those. But I want to start by pointing out that in order to achieve optimal results from your employee survey, this actually begins before your data is collected. I'm not for sure how many folks take the time to really think strategically about their employee engagement initiative, but you should spend quite a bit of time on the front end really asking yourself some important questions to help you uncover what it really is that you'd like to measure in your survey to get the best data, the best feedback from your employees. And all of that begins before your survey is even deployed, before your data is collected. So part of that and being proactive, is clearly defining your objectives. And this tends to be the first step in designing your survey and considering what kind of information you hope to collect from the survey and how you intend to put this information to use. So if you know your objectives, this will make it far easier to write your questions, decide which people you want to target, but also it will make it a lot easier to take action with the results that you collect. It may be helpful, maybe even to begin to think through how you might want to analyze or present your data on the back end and how this might impact what you need to ask or include in the survey to better filter the results. So if you know that you really want to dig into how your remote employees feel versus how your corporate office employees feel, it would be important to make sure that you're able to slice and dice your data by that demographic. or by tenure or by location. So deciding on those demographic points up front will really help you get the best out of your employee data and the feedback you receive to ensure that you're able to analyze the data and interpret the data in a way that makes sense for you and your organization. Also, it would be helpful to highlight some initiatives that you may have for the year or some objectives, some things that you know that you want to get started, but you just haven't had the data to back up those initiatives or to really support why you'd like to move in that direction. So make sure that you write those out and that you have questions that will tap into those areas. So that way, after the employee survey, you now have the data that you need to move forward with those initiatives or to support why you are moving or choosing not to move in a certain direction. Also, with target audience, putting the survey in front of the right people is going to be key in getting a high response rate and to getting the most valuable information. So knowing your audience will also make it easier for you to draft your questions and ensure that you are targeting the right employee population. With employee engagement surveys, we typically would suggest that you would send out your engagement survey to your entire employee population, but there are instances where it may make sense to only send your survey to a segmented group of the population. So for an example, if you have a ton of new hires who haven't been with the organization for longer than 90 days, it may be very difficult for them to answer these survey questions or for them to form opinions about these questions just because they're so new to the organization. So they just might not be able to provide valuable feedback for you. You might decide to exclude them from the survey. Also, if you've acquired other companies or and those folks haven't been with your organization for a long time, they may run into the same issue and they just might not be able to formulate an opinion on most of your engagement questions. So it may make sense in that case to exclude them from the distribution list of the survey. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your target audience, because there may be some instances where you decide not to survey your entire employee body. Next, I really want to dive deeper into the specific questions that you ask in your survey. So we want to avoid from asking questions that do not yield actionable data. So those questions that may be vague or just very hard to measure, we want to be sure that we are not including those. So I've included some examples here so that you can cross-check the questions that you have to make sure that you don't have any questions that are not actionable or just difficult to interpret or measure. Some of those questions are, my boss cares about me, just very vague. I like my boss. I trust my boss. Those three questions are very vague. They're not specific. And if you were to get back very negative feedback in regards to any of those statements, it would be very difficult to formulate any sort of action plan around those items. Or what would you do with that sort of data? What actions would you take if everyone said that their boss did not care about them? Or if everyone said that they did not like their boss? Does everyone get a new boss if they decide that they don't like their boss? Is that realistic? What sort of changes do you make based on that data? Even, I trust my boss. Well, what do you do in that situation if you receive tons of negative feedback in that area? So we want to be sure that we're only asking questions in our survey that are measurable and that are specific and that we'll be able to take specific action upon if necessary. So some examples of some questions that are drafted in a much better way, that are more specific you can ask questions such as, my manager makes it clear what I am expected to accomplish. So that can replace my boss cares about me in a sense if knowing what you're expected to accomplish equates to having a great boss or equates to having a boss that cares. So you really want to ask yourself, well, what am I attempting to measure by asking this question, my boss cares about me? And then as you brainstorm through that, you may come up with a few different points where you can split those topics up into different questions. So that's just one example. Knowing what you're expected to accomplish is a very specific question that can replace that. Also, even questions like, our leadership team leads by example. That's huge. Or even, my manager, my boss, leads by example. That's much more specific than, I like my boss. Or it really answers the questions, well, what do you like about your manager or your boss? And you may have come up with, well, I like the fact that they lead by example, or vice versa. So it really transforms that statement into a more specific statement. And then also, when we talk about trust, one way to get at that could be, the leaders of my organization effectively provide an ethical and trustworthy work environment. So that's very specific, and it's much better than the vague statement of, I trust my boss. So be sure to refrain from asking questions that are not actionable, and instead asking questions that are specific and measurable, questions that we can then implement an action plan around, and that we can really truly implement some change around. Similar to that, we want to be sure that we do our best to eliminate junk data. And what I mean by junk data is data that is very hard to interpret or to make any solid conclusions about, based on the nature of the feedback. So recently, with new trends in employee engagement and engagement surveys, we really want to move away from having a 5-point or an odd scale, which usually will have a neutral point as the midpoint, or a neither agree nor disagree point as your midpoint. We want to move away from that and eliminate that neutral bucket and move to a 6-point scale, or a even scale, so to speak. So by doing that, you really eliminate that neutral zone, because that neutral zone is just a very, very sticky situation. And it's very difficult to interpret why respondents select neutral, or that midpoint of neither agree nor disagree in a survey. Respondents who select neutral just may not wish to form an opinion about that specific statement. They may be avoiding providing their true and honest opinion. So in a case where they may really want to strongly disagree with the statement, they may choose to neither agree nor disagree just to play it safe. They may just be indecisive or indifferent and just not have the ability to make a decision one way or the other on that statement. So they just go for the midpoint instead. Or they just may use neutral as a way of saying that they're unsure, as a way of saying that they have no opinion, as a way of saying that they don't understand the question. They may use this interchangeably. So throughout the survey, they may select neutral for one question because they don't want to form an opinion, but on the next question, it's because they didn't decide. On the next question, it's because they just don't understand the question. And then in that case, you may end up with a huge percentage of your employee population that select the neutral bucket or the midpoint on your rating scale. And it's just very difficult to draw conclusions based on that neutral zone. So in order to eliminate having or the risk of having a large percentage of your employee population fall in that neutral zone, we'll want to be sure that we eliminate that by introducing a 6-point scale or an even scale that forces your respondents to either be on the positive end of the spectrum or the negative end of the spectrum on either of your survey questions. So they'll be forced to pick a side either way. And then on the back end, you won't be tasked with, well, how do I explain why 68% of my population selected neutral in regards to this statement, or what does that even mean? It just gets very, very tricky. So if we can, we want to do our best to eliminate that and any junk data that we might receive with our employee feedback. And then moving on to beyond the types of questions to ask and the rating scale that you should use, one of the most important pieces of this entire initiative or project would be to take action. Once you've received your employee feedback, it's going to be imperative that you take action with the information that was provided to you. And just being aware that your employees are depending on you. They're depending on you to do something with the information that they've provided. We tell our clients all the time here at TalentQuest, before they partner with us on an engagement survey project, we want to make sure that we have this discussion and we make sure that there are plans in place to take action with the data that they will receive because we don't want to waste their time and we don't want the organization that we're working with to waste their employees' time in collecting all of this information and not having prepared to do anything with it or not have any plans to take action. So we want to make sure that this is at the forefront and that this is your highest priority when implementing an employee survey. So with that, there are a few things that we want to make sure that we cover when communicating the results and creating action plans. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that we review the results with your senior management team and to really help them understand the survey themes, identify any key strengths for the organization, and even highlight those primary opportunities of improvement. So putting the employee feedback and the results of the survey in front of your senior management team first is truly going to go a long way. It's going to increase their level of buy-in, and hopefully it will lead to you having their support as you continue to create some more specific action plans around the feedback that you heard from your employees. After you've had the opportunity to review the results with your senior management team, it's going to be very important to provide some sort of summary of the results to the larger employee body. This just lets them know that you've heard their voices, you've heard their opinions, and it gives them the heads up to start to prepare them for any action planning that's to follow. So you don't necessarily have to communicate the full detailed report that you walked through with your senior management team, but at least at a high level, provide your employees with the results of the survey and let them know that something else is coming and to be on the lookout for some specific action plans. To help you carry out some of these action plans that you'll want to create, it may be helpful to appoint a sponsor or a coordinator, a task force, or even put together some sort of committee that can really help you take these ideas and plans to fruition and from start to finish. It may be too much of a burden to task one individual with completing, 4 or 5 action plans or even 3 different areas. It just may be difficult depending on the bandwidth of that individual or even for yourself. So you'll want to enlist the help of a sponsor or a coordinator so that they can put together some teams of individuals who can really help you take some of these ideas and put them into action and to put them into place. And then we want to be sure that we review and communicate these action plans as we move forward, and then to engage your sponsors throughout the process. So to ensure that they're involved and utilize them for help and for support to make sure that these initiatives really get done, and that everyone in the organization is aware of the action plans that are being worked on and the progress that you are making. So just communicate, communicate, communicate. There's no way that you could over communicate your survey results to your employee population, and being transparent and making sure that they're in the know. They'll really value that in the long run. The sixth thing that I want you to know or that I want you to make note of is to clarify your next steps. So once you've utilized your sponsors and your task force to help you identify those ways to collect further follow-up information from employees, but just making sure that you're clear about your next steps and how these action plans will be carried out. What we don't want is for them to just sound like big picture ideas, or oh, that looks nice on paper, but how are we really going to get that done? Just being very specific and clear about how you will go about achieving that goal. You can also conduct, I mentioned in the last slide, focus groups to explore or to get down into detail into some areas that you may have not been able to dig as deep into with the employee survey. Opening up these focus groups to your employee population is a good way to increase buy-in as well. So if you've highlighted your areas where you will take action, and these are your top 3 or 4 areas of opportunity for your organization, if you create some sort of focus groups where it makes sense, of course, depending on what was highlighted by the feedback, but these individuals will volunteer to help on a certain committee. And the individuals who will typically volunteer are going to be those who are super passionate about making a change, and they're very dedicated to the cause and to the mission. They're most likely going to be some of your more engaged employees, and they'll really want to have a hand in creating that change. So creating focus groups, opening that opportunity up to your employee population will really help them add value to the process and increase their buy-in for the surveys to follow. So they'll remember the level of detail and commitment that you provided to the survey process when the survey rolls around the following year. And they'll be sure to complete their survey, and they'll want to be involved in the action planning process if they had a desirable, experience the first time around. It's also probably going to be important to think about creating and providing some sort of medium for information to be communicated back through the channels to assist with any corporate approval or finalization of plans of action. So we want to make sure that before we get too far down the road and too deep into our focus groups and our action planning, that we are communicating our progress and our thoughts to the executive team or to whoever may need to approve the ideas that your group has come up with. So we don't want to get to the end of the road just to know that something's not in the budget, or that your senior leadership team would like to move in a different direction. We want to make sure that we're checking in with those individuals to get their feedback, to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all moving in the right direction. So that's going to be key in achieving optimal results in a timely fashion. So when we talk about your action plans, and again, creating the action plans may be easier than actually committing to the action plans that you've created. So we want to make sure that throughout this whole process that we create some sort of project plan or something that's going to keep us on track, that's really going to hold us accountable for the action plans that we've put in place. So one of those things could be just to create a concrete timeline or some sort of time frame for implementation, or when things should be carried out, by what date, by which quarter should things be completed. Again, communicate your outcomes. Communicate the outcomes of the focus groups and action plans to employees. This not only prepares them for changes that will be taking place, but it also establishes accountability within the action planning process. So being sure to voice your progress to the larger employee body, let them know that, hey, we heard you last month when you provided your employee feedback. We told you that we would be doing some things. Here's what we've been working on over the past month. Here's everything that we've accomplished so far. Here are the things that we are still seeking to accomplish. And this is the estimated time frame of when we'll think we'll be able to implement these changes. So really being transparent and sharing that information with your employees is going to go a long way. Keeping in mind that not all of your employees will be serving on these focus groups, so they won't have that level of detail in regard to your action plans unless you make it a point to share it with them. Also, we want to monitor and measure your progress at achieving your goals in the action plan on a regular basis. So just being sure to celebrate those small wins along the way and those small milestones, in addition to the bigger milestones. Just being sure to keep your employees motivated and recognize success as it happens, and to keep the momentum going so that you can ensure that you are able to reach your goals. And then lastly, don't forget it. Do not set it and forget it in terms of your employee engagement survey. We want to make sure that this data is always at the forefront of your discussions, that you continue to bring up this feedback throughout the year in your leadership discussions, and being sure that your employees know that you haven't forgot about the information that they provided, no matter how long ago that information was collected. There are ways to continuously measure your improvement. You can conduct regular follow-up employee surveys. So some of our clients like to conduct surveys every year. Some of our clients like to deploy surveys every other year, but to be sure that you have a way to track your progress. So doing some sort of year-over-year analysis or identifying trends over the years so that you can really see that, hey, what we've implemented is making a difference and it's making a positive change. Our levels of engagement are improving. Just having a way to check and make sure that you're moving in the right direction in terms of employee engagement and the new initiatives that you might have put in place. You could also do what's called a pulse survey that a lot of organizations are doing now. And these are brief, maybe 3 to 5 question surveys that are very targeted for a specific topic area, just to elicit additional employee feedback. So after you've administered your employee engagement survey, there may be a topic area where you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive and ask a few additional questions to the employee body to help with your action planning or to help solidify the initiatives that you might want to put in place. So those are called pulse surveys, and you can do those throughout the year until you're ready for your next larger employee engagement survey. So a ton of ways to continuously measure your improvement. We just want to make sure that you are doing so. And then also, as you implement those new changes, whether they're additions to the break room or a new training program or a refined performance management process, as you're implementing these changes because of what you've heard in your employee survey, be sure to voice that to your employee population, and to let them know every time you've implemented something, as it rolls out, make sure you make that connection between the feedback that you heard from the survey and why this change is happening. So you may say, this is a new training program that we're rolling out. We're really excited about it. And the reason why we're doing this is because of the feedback that we heard from you in the employee survey. So we thank you for providing that information. And we want you to know that this is a direct result of the information that you provided to us. Making a statement as simple as that to your employee population really helps make that connection between the employee survey and between the initiatives that you put in place, so that they are aware that, hey, they really heard us, and these are the things that they're doing because of the feedback that we were able to provide. Lastly, I do want to leave a few minutes for questions, but I wanted to provide you with just a model that summarizes everything that we talked about today and leaves you with a more practical way of how to take this information and run with it and implement it within your own organization. So first, it may be imperative for you to just take a temperature check, and that could be through your employee engagement survey and how well your organization is performing and some areas where you know that you may be seeking to improve. Again, having that leadership buy-in from the very beginning is going to be critical to the success of this initiative, and ensuring that you have their support every step along the way, but then also knowing that your leadership team is excited about this initiative and that they're really leading this engagement is going to help your employee body feel more comfortable completing the survey. They're going to be more motivated to complete the survey if they know that it's something that's not only important to their management team, but it's important to those executive leaders as well. Communicating the results at either a town hall meeting, somewhere where you can get in front of your entire employee population and just share the feedback that you've heard and the action plans, the initial action plans that you are going to take, and just identifying those key issues or those key areas that you'll focus on that year. And knowing that it may be 10 or 12 things that came out of the survey that you want to focus on, but just realize that it's not realistic to want to touch on each of those things immediately, that you may have to narrow down that list and put it in a more manageable list of maybe 3 or 4 things that you could do each year. So communicating that with the employee body so that they're not expecting 12 different changes, that they have some realistic expectations of what will happen after they've given their feedback. And then again, just committing to those action plans and seeing them through, and then taking continuous action, whether that's through your pulse surveys or through your engagement surveys, deploying them year over year so that you can have that additional data and you can begin to identify some trends, but just being sure that it's something that you continue to measure. I know we talked about in the beginning of this presentation how important employee engagement was and why it matters. So we want to be sure that we keep those statistics and those facts at the forefront so that we can continue with our action plans and just being sure that we are continuing to make our workplaces a better place to work, and realizing that there's always room for improvement along the way. So I want you to take that with you, and hopefully that you've taken some good notes today and you're more informed on the employee engagement survey process and really how to maximize your employee data and really get the most out of the feedback from your employees. So I just want to open up the floor for questions. We have a few more minutes, and I would be happy to answer them for you. And then I also have your SHRM PDC code listed on your screen as well. So if you have a SHRM certification and you'd like to log this presentation in for professional development credits, that code is on your screen as well.
Thank you so much, Janiece. That was a great presentation. We did have a question come in via email, and I wrote it down, so I'll read it to you. And anybody else on the line, if you want to send one over, we have a few minutes to get to questions. So the question that we got, Janiece, said, how can you encourage your employees to give you an honest answer? I often feel people answer our surveys giving us answers that they think they want us to hear.
Yep, that's a great question. And that typically probably happens more frequently than we'd like to admit. Two things. The elimination of the neutral bucket will sort of help force those individuals to provide a true and honest answer by forcing them to be either on the favorable side or the unfavorable side of the spectrum. But more importantly, just utilizing a third-party vendor to administer your surveys is really going to maximize the confidentiality of your survey. It will protect the integrity of your data, and it's a good way to have all of your employees feel more comfortable and confident in providing their true and honest opinion. So if they know that a third party will be responsible for administering the survey, if they know that they'll be responsible for analyzing the results of the survey and reporting the results back to your organization in a way that's confidential and does not identify the employees by name or any way that would make it very easy to identify who the employees are, then they tend to provide you with some true and honest opinion. So that would be my suggestion, is to try to utilize a third party the next time you deploy your survey so that they feel a little bit more relaxed in knowing that there's someone outside of the organization that will be reviewing their feedback.
That was every question that we had. We got a few thank you and very informative, so we do appreciate your positive feedback there, everyone. Thank you. If you have any questions, please go ahead and reach out to us. We're happy to continue the conversation in email, on the phone. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you for your time and hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.